Thanks, everybody. We have, I guess, if everybody in the gallery could please take your seats, we're underway. Thank you. We have again a mixed in-person and virtual meeting. A number of our delegations will be virtual. One is in person in the room here, but thank you, everybody. To begin with, we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. Item 4 on the agenda, looking for adoption of the agenda as presented. I don't believe there's any staff changes. Moved Director Popoff, seconded Tierney. No other changes, no discussion, all in favor. Any opposed? Not seeing any, that's carried. I'd like to ask for a motion for freedom of the floor for Directors McFadden and Main. I don't think we have any other visiting directors online. Moved Chair Watson, seconded Tierney. Discussion, all in favor?
Discussion.
Sure.
Just noting that sometimes like Director Page might show up. Is there a generic kind of municipal freedom of the floor we could provide, or should we just see if he shows up?
Well, CEO was mentioning we can maybe just add this as after adoption of the agenda, standing item. And then we could absolutely make our colleagues aware that, yeah, if they come, we shall acknowledge them. Yeah. I think we still have to do it individually.
Okay, we'll wait. I'll watch.
Yeah.
Well, Chair, point of order.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting that we speak of municipal freedom of the floor at RDCK meetings.
Hello.
That work
Okay,
the
sorry.
other way.
Director Graham has no sound right now.
Okay, we got a couple of things going on. To Director Davidoff, to your question, we've been invited by Preston, usually to committee of the whole, given freedom of the floor and express our thoughts or give our input to several Preston Valley issues. So I think every jurisdiction has to work that out amongst themselves. Do we have a sound issue? Director Graham, are you able to hear us now?
No, she is not.
So we're going to pause up to 5 minutes for a connectivity issue here because we have a member of the committee who's unable to join the meeting. So as per the procedures, we'll wait a few minutes until she can get connected or phone in if necessary.
I'll just text her.
Yeah, and Chair, I would like to continue the conversation after what you just said, after we get our sound issues resolved.
Briefly, we can do that, and then actually we didn't quite formally conclude the vote for freedom of the floor, which should be pretty straightforward.
She's logged off. So we'll just
Logged
wait.
off, she'll try and log on. We'll
Yeah.
wait a couple more minutes.
I'm back and I have sound now.
Excellent. So that was only 1 minute spent on that. So briefly, another point, Director Davidoff, on freedom of the floor, and then
Yes.
we will formally vote.
Yeah, it's just that we're very inclusive. We provide freedom of the floor to our municipal partners, and I'm just like you mentioned in Creston that basically you Chair have freedom of the floor at a Creston City Council meeting.
We are generally using a format where Creston will convene council, and then they will recess and go to a committee of the whole, like an impromptu committee of the whole. We're given fairly generous freedom of the floor for discussion during committee of the whole. Then we'll either stay and listen to the rest of the council meeting or whatever, but then they resume their normal procedures for the council meeting. We can also ask questions at a council meeting, but the other method I described is the friendliest I have found. So that's just one format for you to discuss with your local mayors. So we did not quite vote on freedom of the floor for 2 visiting directors. All in favor? So that's covered. We will move on to receipt of minutes. They have been received. I don't think we have any additional changes or corrections to be made. 6.1, delegations were a little different this time. Instead of doing our delegations for business items, land use applications, we have through Mr. Morrison arranged a delegation. We have Brent Felker from UBCM, possibly Toby Simpson as well. And they're going to give us, within 10 minutes, maybe a bit of an overview on how they see these changes in the current funding arrangement. with the federal, provincial government, UBCM, on the Build Canada Community Building Fund. And then we'll have a little bit of time for questions. Hopefully we'll contain that to about 20 minutes total. So, Mr. Felker, are you alone or do you have your colleague with you online? And please introduce yourself and give us your overview.
Okay, good morning and thank you, Chair. Yes, by way of introduction, my name is Brant Felker. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're
Yes, great,
here,
okay,
and
great, perfect. My name is Brant Felker. I am the manager of the Canada Community Building Fund program. I'm with the Union of BC Municipalities. I'm also joined today by Toby Simpson. Toby is our senior officer involved with the Community Works Fund program. He oversees the day-to-day of the Community Works Fund program in BC. So yes, we have been asked to provide a bit of an update on the Canada Community Building Fund, and my understanding is specifically dealing with the Community Works Fund for regional districts, including any changes to the new program as we begin to roll it out. I thought before we get into the details of the Community Works Funds, I thought it important to provide a short background to the Canada Community Building Fund program as a whole. The program, formerly called the Gas Tax Fund, has been in existence since 2005, nearly 20 years now, and sees a federal transfer of public funds to all local governments across Canada for local government infrastructure projects. So nationally, this is a big program. Nationally, the CCBF is set at $2.4 billion annually, which translates on a per capita basis to British Columbia, roughly around $325 million a year. So this is a large program, both volume and output. So it produces in British Columbia alone upwards of 1,000 distinct projects in British Columbia, with local governments reporting spending around $250 million by local governments. A lot of numbers there, but it's a big program by volume and by number. UBCM, we are unique. We administer this program on behalf of the federal and provincial governments. We have been doing so since 2005. And we deliver that $325 million through three distinct funding programs, one of which is the Community Works Fund, which is roughly around 40% of the pot. The program is governed by an oversight committee made up of the three program partners, being the Government of Canada, the Province of British Columbia, and UBCM representing the local governments. In 2024, the 10-year CCBF agreement, which we were living in, expired. And UBCM entered into negotiations with Canada and the province on a renewed 10-year agreement. In advance of this, we developed an engagement program, which we went out to you as our membership. We held a number of workshops. We had targeted engagements with specific areas, including regional districts, and issued a survey to get feedback on the programming. What we had heard during this engagement program was the program was generally well received, and there was a broad interest in maintaining the funding structure of the existing programming. What we further heard was that there was an interest in expansion of the programming to cover off more investment categories and make more costs eligible for use. So adding further flexibility to this program. It was around 2 years of negotiations with both program partners, and we did land in June with a renewed 10-year, $3.4 billion agreement, which was signed in June 2024. So this is great news. We'll see dedicated, predictable funding transferred by Canada over the next decade for continued investment in local government infrastructure priorities. One of the key programs we also maintained was the Community Works Fund. This is our longest standing program, and I would say probably our most well-received program based on the structure of it. And as you all know, the CWF provides local governments in BC with upfront funding twice annually for infrastructure investments. So local governments make localized decisions on how best to utilize these funds according to the terms and conditions of the agreement and report after the fact annually on these. UBCM doesn't have an approval role in the Community Works Funds, but we provide advice. We also do a review after we receive the reports. And then we roll those up and create an outcomes and output report for Canada, which are delivered in the fall of each year. And once those are approved by Canada, we receive the next year's funding, is really how that mechanism works for Community Works Fund. So in the past summer, so in July and August, the CWF was our first program, which we rolled out under this new CCBF agreement. We wanted to get this program out quickly because we didn't want interruption in the delivery of the funds. And for the most part, we received, I think, about 95% of Community Works Fund agreements now back. So local governments are receiving the funds at a similar funding level than they received last year under the old program. We also saw an expansion of the program, which is a great thing. We saw we maintained the 17 existing investment categories. We also saw allowance now for fire truck infrastructure and fire halls, as well as resilience. These are things we've heard year over year through UBCM convention, through resolutions, to really open up, especially in the regional district structure, fire halls and fire trucks being something that was always a lot of interest in. We also saw an expansion in costs around feasibility studies and detailed design as standalone eligible costs. Again, this allowed additional flexibility under the CWF program. We also saw an expansion of eligibility for housing under a planning category, and we'll see how that rolls out over the coming months. There were some additional additions to the program from a reporting side. Federally, there was a significant interest in collecting more data and more information, specifically around housing, but also around geolocations, and wanting a measurement for outputs and outcomes for each project that saw investments. So we'll be rolling that out in the spring. So as local governments, you will see some additional reporting requirements. We're trying our best to keep it at a minimum through our reporting system. There are also some, around the CWF specifically, some additional requirements to consider if local governments wish to provide CWF funds for non-local government projects. And Toby will be speaking to those in a few minutes when he walks through the program guidelines. And the final piece that's an addition is there is now a 5-year spending requirements for funds received. There's an asterisk with that. So what we were looking for is we saw a number of local governments that were holding on to unspent funds over a 5-10 year period. And we're really looking for how those funds were expected to be spent. So we've added a 5-year limit. However, if future capital projects were identified in long-term capital plans, we would be waiving those just so we have a better understanding of how those funds will be spent. So that was a really quick snapshot of the programs and some of the changes that we made to the Community Works Fund. I will say that the program will have a similar look and feel as it has in the past 10 years, with a few changes around the edges. And what I'd like to do, Chair, is just move it over to Toby, if I may, to provide an overview of the new CWF program guides as it really relates to regional districts.
Certainly, and I think any emphasis you can give, as you said, you'd refer to the funding for non-local government projects. That'll probably be where you receive most, if not all, of the questions. So yeah, please go ahead. Thanks, Brant, and go ahead, Toby.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brant. We sort of had two items identified during our negotiations, as Brant mentioned, one being the high level of unspent funds held by local governments, regional districts and municipalities in British Columbia. The benefit of the program, of course, is that you can bank and borrow your money or bank your money over time and use it for projects that you select. The other issue that was identified during negotiation by the federal government and has been for many years is the number of third-party projects in British Columbia, which we call them third-party projects. They're projects that involve infrastructure that's not owned by the local government. So RDCK and many regional districts have over the years had many of these projects. In the rest of the country, the rest of the country doesn't really participate in these types of projects, so it's really an issue that's unique to BC. So we've created some program guidelines, so that's unique to our province. They include sort of 4 points and a fifth, which Brant has mentioned, which is the 5-year spending. The first being that the board or council has identified any project as a regional or municipal priority within a long-term capital investment plan. So this could be a recreation master plan, a long-term capital plan, any sort of plan that's endorsed by the regional district. The second being that the board has not prioritized a third-party project over a local government-owned project. Third, being that the project is supported by asset management planning. Now, that's not necessarily asset management planning at the regional district level, but that's asset management planning from your third party. And the fourth being that any project that is with a third party would meet a minimum spending threshold of $25,000, which would mean it would qualify for our outcomes reporting. So those are sort of the 4 points, as well as the 5-year spending that we've sort of added to the program guidelines to ensure that we sort of align our program with the outcomes and outputs of the rest of the country. So with those 4 points, I would pass it back to the chair and ask if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks very much. So I do have a speakers list, 5 or 6 deep now. I have Popoff, Watson, Davidoff. I see in the room now adding Newell and Vandenberg. We'll start, the list may grow. We'll see how much time we have. Director Popoff, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a whole bunch of questions, but in view of all the other people that want to ask questions, I will only ask one. And, along with that, I'd like to get contact with Toby or Brent, where I can contact them offline to ask the other questions, given the opportunity. So my question is water systems that are not RDCA owned, and specifically improvement districts and irrigation districts. They are a form of local government, or were a form of local government, and were funded by the province at one time. They're no longer funded by province. Can we use our community works funds to basically bring them up to regional district specs, so possibly maybe they could be taken over by the regional district?
See the Brent? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Director. The short answer is we don't have any rules in our agreement that says you cannot fund improvement districts for water systems. I know provincially there's an interest that they will not fund them unless it's taken over by the regional district. We don't have that rule in the Canada Community Building Fund agreement. I will say yes, provided that those 4 points are considered when making that decision. So water systems are certainly an interest nationally of the CCBF program. It's been one of the categories that has been in existence since 2005. So certainly, provided that those conditions Toby worked through are met and demonstrated, that then yes, that's something that we would consider as an eligible expenditure.
Thank you. Board Chair Watson.
Thank you. Hello, Toby and Brent. Nice to meet you. So I first want to just note that I recognize this agreement has been put in place. We don't necessarily will advocate, but I definitely understand that this isn't something we necessarily have a decision authority upon. The two things I want to raise is just recognizing that BC is unique because we recognize rural areas do not exist in the same way municipalities do. We don't have the densification to enable a municipality. That being said, many of our rural areas, the one I represent, has 24 unincorporated communities. And you have anywhere from 10 people in a concentrated area to maybe 100. The ability to provide water, recreation halls, any kind of like regular municipal systems is really, really challenged by not only regulations that are designed for urban settings and densification, but also just the fact that the ability to provide infrastructure on that scale in such a large regional district is very cost prohibitive. So I've appreciated the ability to work for water systems. That Community Works is one of those avenues for them. And then the other one with the recreation halls have been really important. We don't own all of those. It's just not feasible. And they double as emergency halls in fire seasons, such as 2 of them this summer in my area for the Argento fire and the complex up there. So they're essential infrastructure, and our ability to support them has been greatly dependent on for ensuring that they're up to speed. They got all sorts of different energy backup systems because they're also at the end of the line, so the grid's very vulnerable. So I just want to note that those are 2 really critical pieces to community sustainability and health, which are all the values we share. So I just want to note that in terms of my advocacy towards these changes. My specific question is around broadband. We don't live in areas with cell service wall to wall. We don't live in areas where internet was considered an essential service. When I first moved back to Taslow, TELUS told me the parking lot was full. I had no way of having internet for over a year, and I used mobile data as an elected official for that region for a year. The solution was our local ISP, who was able to figure out fiber. They created rule-based programming that was applicable based on the geography when no other for-profit entity would come into that. The regional district has provided up to millions of dollars through community works over the years. So what I'd like to know is, I agree with the asset management, definitely critical. I know for RSP they do that. Would they qualify under that third party, assuming they meet the criteria you set out? Can we still be able to support the broadband? Because that has been critical to communications. I'll just add that not only do we not have cell services, but our landlines go down, internet goes down, but they have been able to maintain communications and emergencies. So critical infrastructure. So hopefully through that little ramble, you got my question, but really wanting to ensure that broadband and communication services can still be supported.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for the comment. I've been doing this since 2009. Certainly, we've been advocating for regional. We know that the system, this program nationally was built for municipalities, right? So regional districts are different, and we remind Canada every time we sit down with them of the unique nature of the landscape of British Columbia. So. That's just a comment to your comment. For broadband, it is an eligible investment category in our program. I will look to Toby on a lot of these details before he can't kick me under the table here because we're in different rooms. But Toby, any comments on the?
Yeah, no, I mean, broadband, certainly it's an eligible category. And I think it's one of those examples where it sort of everything will align. Like, I think it's very likely that regional districts have a broadband or a communications plan in place. There's no issue with using a third party to do that type of stuff. It's just that these things need to be found in some type of local government planning document first, right? Which I think in terms of a broadband case, we've seen lots of projects with RDCK. I know the Columbia Basin Broadband Initiative has many projects that go through the municipalities and the regional districts. So we're funding those and certainly don't have a problem with those projects as long as they meet the other criteria that we've set out.
We should move on. Preamble and context is appreciated because these are the people who will hear our issues down the stream, but we have more speakers and we have 4 landowners that also want to have. So moving on to Director David Off, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Happy New Year to Brent and Toby, and thank you for walking into the lion's den here. So, you mentioned that there was a process that was followed, that there were negotiations, that there were consultations. I just don't remember being consulted by anyone on this, and maybe I missed it. I hope I didn't. But I've been a rural director. It's my 14th year, and when we have paradigm shifts in programs and how things are funded, I don't believe, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. So this is my first question. Were rural directors directly contacted for feedback on changes to how this community works funding would work for third party purposes?
So our engagement started around 2 years ago. We had targeted engagements through webinars with regional districts. We also went around to all the area associations, and I presented. And we also produced a survey that ran for about 4 months. So that was in 2023, probably from the spring to summer. We also presented at convention that summer. Now, talking about the specifics of the third-party projects, third-party projects are still eligible under this program. So we don't see this as a removal of third-party projects. What we were tasked with was to look closely at how funding is being spent within regional districts. We're starting to see that projects were there was more of a direction towards third-party projects being funded versus local government-owned assets. We needed to defend the program's intent with the Government of Canada in order to continue these programs, including Community Works funds. So we came up with some conditions or some guidelines on how to best move that needle towards what the Government of Canada was interested in, which was supporting local government owned assets as a priority with the use of the Community Works funds. So the program itself, Community Works Fund program, what we heard was that the program was well received, and we didn't want to see too many changes to it. So to maintain the flexibility of it, local governments receive it up front, they make localized decisions, they report after the fact. We didn't want to take those funds and have controls over those where you applied for funding through UBCM, et cetera. Unfortunately, it's not an unconditional grant. There are some conditions. We have to follow kind of the federal and provincial interest for that. So yes, there was a consultation period. Was it specific to third-party projects? Maybe not directly. It was more about, do you like the flexibility of the Community Works Fund program and some of the other programs?
So supplemental, Chair, for
Quickly, we have a couple more speakers. If it's general in nature, please go ahead quickly.
yes, thank you. So my question is based on the response. I think it was Brent, either you or Toby that said you don't approve stuff and you don't approve stuff and you don't deny stuff. But we just had a conversation where you're kind of approving stuff or potentially saying, yeah, that's okay, and something's not okay, subject, of course, to it meeting the conditions. Would you be able to meet with us with, maybe there's some rural directors that would like to meet with you, Brent and Toby, on how we could work together. For example, if we wanted to look at the Castle Garden District Recreation Commission, working with you to say, how can we include recreational infrastructure in our community as part of our priorities? Like, we have master plans and things like that, but if we wanted to kind of have a bigger umbrella covering recreational amenities that are super important to for example, I got an inquiry on disc golf. Disc golf is huge. And I just said, I don't think I can support your project because you're third party and you are a society. But is there a way that we could work together with UBCM support and you, Toby, and Brent in particular, to have a bigger umbrella, to have like a rec commission meet with you and say, okay, if we include these critical recreational infrastructure amenities under our umbrella, not ownership, but in terms of priority for the community, could you see us working together to develop that so that they would qualify for the funding?
Sorry, I didn't even cut you off there. Yeah, I mean, I think, and just to look to Toby, a large part of what Toby does on the day-to-day is work with communities on navigating the terms and conditions of this agreement. Certainly, as we're rolling out these kind of requirements under the new programming, we are open to having further discussions with every community on how to best meet the terms and conditions of the agreement. So certainly we're open to that.
Thank you.
So I think in something like that where we get into details, probably it should go through General Manager Wolf and or CAO Horn to talk about how those kind of engagements, more detailed engagements, might roll out. Thanks. We'll go to Directors Newell and Vandenberg. Go ahead, Director Newell.
Well, maybe, hi, it's Tom Newell here. I wondered, in reading number 1 of the 4 criteria, would it does the board, would you recommend that the board passes resolution prioritizing things such as community recreation centers that are not owned by the RDCK, for example?
Toby, do you want to touch on this detail?
So you're asking if like a resolution prioritizing the project would be enough to sort of make
Well, the
it...
general, as Director Davidoff had said, sorry, Chair, is it okay if I...
Go ahead, elaborate.
Just to clarify my question, would a board resolution that says that the board, as part of their long-term capital plan, does support the concept of supporting local private water systems, local community centers, for example, internet expansion, connectivity expansion. Like, is a board resolution required to begin to meet the requirement of number one?
Well, I mean, I think requirement number one is that the asset or the actually shows up in a local long-term plan, right? Like, I think if we end up in a space where we pass a resolution and then we just keep having the same number of third-party projects that we have had traditionally, that these types of guidelines won't really necessarily, like, I would say just be careful, right? And we don't want to end up in the same place that we did, that we have, right? So I think it could, but we don't just want to find a way to work around these program guidelines that we've had to develop with the federal government to keep this program going towards where we want it to end up.
I'll jump in quickly if I may, Chair. Yes, we are looking for a resolution. And we always have been, actually, even under the old agreement, we were asking for any third-party project, any money that's going outside of local government assets. There needs to be a resolution confirming that. We're just asking to see it now and to look at those 4 points and seeing how that decision was being made. And I think that's the addition to this. The resolution piece was always part of the decision around third-party projects.
I think the distinction here might be whether there's a project by project resolution, which we require internally always. The board has to approve, no matter where it comes from, committee or whatever. We always have a board resolution. That's a given. We'll have to pay attention to all 4 points, as you say. The question around a blanket resolution, I think there's going to have to be more meat on the bones. That's not going to be enough. It's the impression I get. Maybe we'll go to Director Vandenberg and then we'll try and wrap this up. Go ahead, Director.
Great, thank you through the chair. Good morning, gentlemen. My question is in relation to the first question that you entertained, and that is specifically around improvement districts / water systems. And I'm going to the 4th point of the criteria, and just as a refresher, typical local government services, non-RDCK water systems could be formalized, but it's being supported by an asset management planning. Of course, that makes all the sense. But in the report that I have, it suggests that, and these projects are often being supported by asset management planning. For me, in terms of clarity, these improvement districts, these smaller water systems, they'll need to put up the capital to develop an asset management plan. And I'd like to hear that with certainty that this funding could be used to assist them to create that asset management plan. Because without that, it's a non-starter to further walk ahead on anything. Am I understanding this correctly?
Under the feasibility funding, is that what you're targeting?
Well, I'm referring to our report, which is the disadvantage, but that's all I have, and based on what gentlemen are talking about. It's to do with asset management planning with improvement districts that don't have the resources to be able to pull that off.
Okay.
Just need assurance that there will be monetary support for them to develop their asset management plan so that they can walk forward.
Gotcha. I think I understand. The question is, can we use CWF funds to fund asset management planning for improvement districts in order to get to the next step of provide funding for the water systems?
Yes, thank you.
Is that the understanding? Okay. Toby?
Yeah, no, I think that is. Yeah, no, I think that's a totally reasonable use of the funds. I mean, there's definitely like a chicken and an egg scenario going on first, right? But if the improvement district or the private water system has been identified by the regional district as an essential service for the area, then yeah, I mean, feasibility studies, detailed design, and planning documents are all eligible, some under the drinking water, some under the capacity building category. But yeah, we're really trying to add some accountability to ensure to Canada that there is accountability in the project selection process. So if they're part of a planning document, then yeah, it's okay to do the soft cost as well.
Thank you. Now, Director Tooney also has a question. We'll try and wrap it after this one. Go ahead, please, Director Tooney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Toby and Brent, for joining us today. I'm a first-term director, and what I'm seeing a fair bit is, and I'd like you to comment on this situation with Columbia Basin Trust in our area. Many of our community groups apply to the CBT for funding. The CBT requires that they have to contribute 25% of that funding in cases like playgrounds or major improvements to halls. And do you think the 25% is what we're being asked to help out with through the CBT or through the Community Works funding? Do you have any comments on whether that's eligible or not?
Sorry, I was muted. So is the question around, can you stack your Community Works funds with Columbian Basin Trust grant, which is a 75%? I would have to check. We do. So this program doesn't have stacking rules attached to it. What it does say is it's federal dollars when you're including other grants. So it's really up to Columbia Basin Trust. The question would be back to their program officer as to whether they can stack the two programs. I don't know off the top of my head whether Columbia Basin Trust has stacking rules. I would suggest not, but it'd be a good question to them just to make sure that you're not going down this road and having to then pull back the funds.
Cool.
And I'll just, yeah.
Well, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and wrap up, and Toby, yes.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to what Brant said, it's just that just because Columbia Basin Trust has offered a project money, it doesn't automatically make it eligible in our program, and so we would have to check that as well. We've had some projects with regional districts in Columbia Basin and stuff where they don't quite align, and so that 25% doesn't necessarily bring us up to the $25,000 threshold within the program guidelines, and also they don't always align with our program as well. So it just wouldn't be an automatic check mark for eligibility.
Yeah, just one example.
Well, no, I think there has been an ongoing conversation on the detailed projects if we can. We have gone about half an hour now on this. I think covered some good introductory ground. We still have Mike Morrison as our key contact. Director Popov did ask about contacts directly to either Brant or Toby. So I guess either through Uli or through Mike Morrison, we would have those contacts emailed out to directors if you have very specific questions on particular projects. And it sounds like that is your day job, is it not, Toby?
Yes, it is. Yes, just about all I do. Yeah.
I do thank you very much for your time, and perhaps as Director Davidoff suggested, we'll have a more an expanded, more detailed conversation sometime in the future. We will move on now. We have a number of landowners, and we're going to deal with their issues as our regular committee business. Thanks very much. You can stay on and listen to the rest of the meeting if you like, or leave it as you will. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So we will move into delegations now. We have a number of delegations, planning and building, sorry, item 7.7. We have a number of delegations, either one in the room or online. We will start off in the order that they appear here. 7.1, building bylaw contravention. We have, I believe, Jeremy Richards and or Susan Cormack online. I'm just double checking now. I see Jeremy listed. So we didn't have the opportunity maybe to go through this in detail before. We have a staff report and staff recommendation to file a notice on title for the building bylaw contravention. I'm going to ask staff to give a very brief update on where we're at with staff interactions with yourself, the landowner. And then we're going to invite you as a delegation to provide any additional information which we may not have. And then the committee members may wish to ask you questions. And from there, we'll move into the business of the committee where we will discuss the recommendation and just within the committee have our conversation and come up with a recommendation to the board. So our staff update, Sangeeta, you're going to provide this one. Please go ahead.
Hi, through the chair, to the applicants and to the board, to the rest of the RAC. This site is in non-compliance for the number of dwellings that are starting to be developed on the property. From what I understand, some of the accessory buildings have been converted into dwellings. There is one active building permit for the site, and that is for an accessory building. However, other accessory buildings are being used as dwellings. In fact, just this morning, we received a report from Susan Cormack, the mother of the owner. And it has engineering, I believe, that was the information that we needed. However, the permit has not been issued yet. This compliance issue has been in existence, I think, since 2003, but even prior to that, we've had issues with the site. There are other issues related to the use of the buildings being occupied that were not built, as I mentioned, to be occupied. They're accessory buildings, so that is why staff is recommending 2 NOTs on the 2 accessory buildings that are on site that are been converted to a dwelling without permits.
Okay, thank you. And so I see online Jeremy Richards, I presume, and Susan Cormack. You're both welcome. Thank you for attending the meeting. Either or both of you, if you want, would have up to 15 minutes. If there's information you want to give us about your project, the status, anything we may not be aware of as a committee, and or if you have nothing, new information to provide, we would hope you'd be willing to answer questions from the committee members. So either Jeremy or Susan, please go ahead. Do you have any comments or information to offer? Neither of you have unmuted. You have to unmute for us to hear. Still not hearing anything. I see you're both there.
Well, Susan, unmuted.
Okay, you're very quiet. Go ahead, Susan. Ms. Cormack, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I was in touch with the engineer, and he did send a interim report, but I'm assuming that his actual report will be available fairly shortly.
When you say shortly, do you have a target date? As in is days or a week or a month or more?
I would say you'll get it in the next month. He told me he would try to get it done for today, but he didn't. So I'm assuming that after the meeting's over, it will probably come in within the next month.
And you have 2 building bylaw contravention files with the regional district. Is this report covering one or both of these files?
Both of them, but there was a building permit that they were requesting for a duplex, which really is just a shed right at this point in time. And I think that there is no intent to go forward with that at this point in time. Isn't that correct, Jeremy? Oh, I see his sound is off.
Just give a minute if he wants to unmute.
Just hang on for a minute. So I don't think that particular permit is anything that we're interested in now.
Okay, so if you don't have anything else to add at this point, would you be willing to entertain any questions, other questions from the committee? Are there any questions? It's intellectual area GIC. Are there any committee member questions on this file? Dr. Cunningham, go ahead.
Thank you. Has your engineer sent a letter to the district? Do we have any communication so we know that things are ongoing?
Because that was the concern last time. It was a fair to staff.
Yes, and you had indicated you received today.
It's an interim, notice that they will be their engineer. It is not actually any engineer.
Sorry.
It's an interim notice from an engineer to say that they will take the job, but we don't have the engineer.
So is it in the order of a Schedule B?
We
Stated
have
that-
not received a schedule. We have not issued a building permit for those two buildings that we are being told are being used as dwellings. One of them is being converted to a duplex, which is what we have now confirmed through that engineers communicating. Inspector, I believe, or to be Susan's email.
Okay, so I see Director Vandenberg, I guess ideally questions for the property owners, but if you need clarification from staff, certainly the floor is yours.
Clarification to staff, if I might.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just based on the report, Manager Sudan, you had mentioned that there's some history going back to 2003. The report highlights from 2023. So the history back to 2003 is not within the report, but did I hear you correctly?
It's
All right, thank you.
You may have to speak, that was yes from
Yes,
staff. I want to make sure that the delegate can
Yes,
hear the
through the
responses. Thank you. Chair Watson.
thank you. It's through the staff, just that it's the same question as Vandenberg, but why is it not in the report if it goes back to 2003?
It was a lapse permit on one of the structures that was done in 2008 before my time. So staff did not include that. I didn't notice it in the report. But the current, there are currently two buildings, from what I understand, being occupied that are accessory buildings. So we have people living in them. And we have been chasing this file for a couple of years, as we mentioned, since 2003. And staff are recommending notice on title on those two buildings. And because they're being occupied, they're also in non-compliance with zoning. And I talked to Mrs. Cormack, and she has now hired an engineer. Her son is out of the country. The engineer has sent us a notice to say that they will take the job, but we have not received any engineering.
Supplemental?
Supplemental, I'll just note that I go by the staff report. It's really hard to have information that is not in a staff report be used during the meeting. And our reports generally do go back to the historical information, which is really relevant to something that was from 2003 that would make a big difference. But at this time, it says to 2023. So it'll be up to Director Cunningham, but I'd say that it should be referred. And if that's the case, we should have an updated report. But I won't make that motion.
No, understood.
Yeah.
Before going to CEO, I guess what I will note is that I would want to see that the two actions being recommended on the agenda today are a result of the current information being given. If a permit was lapsed, that is in many ways history. The only reason there are two issues are because there are new issues relating to those. CEO?
Yeah, through the chair, I just wanted to highlight that in the staff report, it does state that upon further review of RDCP files, it would discover that subject building had an original building permit to construct a garage with a loft that was issued in 2004, expired prior to final inspection in 2007. Building permit was lapsed in February 2010 and never completed. That is in the staff report.
But the issue today is not lapsing a garage. The issue today is occupancy of what appears to be a residential building. And that's what I think we will make our recommendation to board on. I guess we're looking for if there's any further questions at this point to the landowners. If not, I will ask them to go back to me. So any questions for the landowners at this point from committee members? Don't see anything in chat, nobody in the room. So Ms. Cormack and Mr. Richards, thank you. If you could mute now, Ms. Cormack, and we will go to our conversation and deliberation on both of these items. But thank you for your input. So, quickly before we close out the delegation, go ahead. Any other comment? Please go ahead.
The accessory building from 2003, is the building that, there was a, building permit requested to make it into a dwelling. And that happened in 2003. Anyhow, that's just for your information. I'm happy to leave. Will you, will we be part of what happens after your discussions, or can we go?
I would certainly encourage you to remain in the meeting through the next may only be 5 minutes or so, while we have additional questions for staff and see what action we'd like to take. We have some options here. We can recommend that we refer this to a future meeting. It has already been referred, but we can say, well, we need more information and bring it back to this committee. We can make a recommendation today, which will go to the regional board tomorrow, and that decision will be final for staff to act on if it's a filing notice on title, or we can come up with any other recommendation the committee wishes. So if you could please mute, thank you for your input as a delegation, and we'll go into the business discussion of these two items, 7.1 and 7.2 now. But as they say, thank you for your input. Questions from the committee for staff and or any recommendations? We're in committee, we could move these as a block or individually. They are parallel in many ways. Director Vandenberg, I see your hand up again, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, question to staff. So the suggested motion would be to file a notice on title. And if I understand it correctly, it could be then rescinded, canceled, upon the receipt of an active building permit or building application. That is my question. Is that correct? And if so, I do not support referral.
Manager Sedan, yes.
So through the chair, once we have an active building permit, we can then, move forward with the building project. But right now we don't.
Sorry, my question was.
The question is more that if a notice on title is filed, when would it be lifted? My understanding is that would be when non-compliance, not just the permit, would be non-compliance has been, we've reached compliance, which would mean successful completion of the permit requirements.
Sure. Through the chair, the MT would be lifted if it was placed on the property as soon as the building permit was closed. So an occupancy was issued.
Thank you.
Watson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just adding the note that I believe the fee for that is $750, or if it's more now, and they would have to pay for that, and I don't believe it would be reimbursed, should it be removed. So there is a fee to that process. And I'll just further note that I do thank you. I do now see, thanks CAO for pointing out in the new format for the reporting is interesting because we used to go by the history from when it first started all the way down to current. And I apologize, I was used to that format. I did not see in the notes that it goes back to 2003. And so I have more questions based on, so what happened between 2008 to now we're in 2023? Did we just drop it? Did we not do anything with it? We knew at the time there was no building permit approved. So why did this circle back 10 years later? So there's just more questions, and I'm sorry, the reporting format, I'll get used to it now, but it used to be by date, and that's how we can see this is 10 years old. That makes a big difference in terms of consideration. When I first read this, it was not even a year old. And so I do have more consideration to giving them that time to figure it out.
Go ahead, manager.
So through the chair, we received complaints from neighbors that the buildings were being occupied, which is why we've investigated. There was an incident on site, so staff did attend with RCMP, I believe, also, and Director Cunningham was on site. So this issue really is escalating because of community complaints that we received from our recently related to those buildings.
So again, the actions are new issues, not the old shed issue. I see Tierney and Cunningham. Please go ahead, Director Tierney.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is to staff. Is it a matter of practice that you have a conversation with the property owner as to the implications of putting Northfield title on their property? Do they understand the implications?
Through the chair, yes, and I shared some information with Susan as well, just recently, and I had a good chat with her about what's going on the property. Her son is out of the country, and she is now dealing with this.
Director Cunningham.
Thank you. Through the chair. The property, as I understand it, has a number of, let's use the word illegal or improper tenants. And the two buildings, the first building, the one, the old street one, was to be built as a garage, as I understand. And then now it's being occupied in spite of there's a do not occupy order on it and a do not, and get a big, the building thing. And I understand both of those have been ignored to date. Is that correct with the staff? Through the chair to staff?
Yes, through the chair, they were ignored, but more recently now action is being taken since Susan Cormack has gotten involved.
Okay. And when you,
Go ahead.
So through the chair, she's now aware that there are issues. Her son is out of the country, and she's engaged an engineer who she has advised us is, and he through an email advised us that they are been retained, but we have no active building permits.
okay, thank you. My question was, the other conditions, the ones about the do not occupy and, stop construction, they have been ignored. Is that not correct?
Yes, through the chair, and there are people occupying these buildings, which is really what our concern is. It's health and safety.
My last comment, thank you, Chair, thank you for the leniency, is that in fact, we don't know the safety of these buildings, including the ones that are not on the list or that are being occupied by, that we don't know about. Some of the buildings are supposed to be destroyed in order to fulfill the requirements of the building permit. They're only allowed two. And that's well beyond it. And I'm responding to the complaints of the neighbors. I recall the proponent saying to me, well, who ratted on me? Everybody in the neighborhood ratted on them. I've gotten, so sorry. Those were his question, and those were, well, basically, I didn't answer the who ratted thing, but the fact is, I'm saying right now, everybody, literally everybody in the neighborhood, there's a circle around the property of neighbors who were upset with the comings and goings of people who really shouldn't be even on the property.
Okay, thank you. So, as they say, items 7.1 and 7.2, we have recommendations that are in lockstep or parallel. Do we have any recommendations from this committee for the board? Director Cunningham.
Are we looking for a motion here? Okay, I understand that some of these things. This is against, I'd really like to do an NOT because I think that we've really, this has been going on far too long. And the fact that.
So are you moving filing an NOT on one or both, Director?
Two things. No, since an engineer has been hired. Well, we haven't heard from them. They knew they had to do it. This just goes on, and it'll be stretched like forever. Yeah, I'd like to motion, no guy knows not that over both properties, please.
That's block 7.1 and 7.2. Do I have a second prior to further discussion? Seconded discussion.
And speaking to it, if the notice on title can be listed if we follow the rest of the procedures. And because this goes on and on, I'm glad an engineer said that he'll do it. The last time they said they had already hired an engineer, we just hadn't gotten the report. Well, at what point do I believe this or don't believe it? Therefore, notice on title of my motion.
Further discussion, Watson?
Yeah, thank you. Just curious, through the chair to staff. So, filing a notice on title goes to land titles and where that registry is. What does that do in regards to occupied dwellings in terms of people still being within them? Do you anticipate that you'll be taking actions beyond the NMT?
So through the chair, it's a good question. If we don't get compliance on this property soon, we will come back to you to recommend other action.
So supplemental,
Go ahead.
just noting the NOT doesn't address the occupied dwellings at this time. You would have to come back to us for further action. Just clarifying, thank you.
Further discussion? Cunningham, Director
I'd
Cunningham.
like to point out the notice on that was for our protection, mainly then not for the owner, because it shows that we have done our due diligence. So if there's an accident on the property or if there's a fire or things happen, we have said, no, this isn't even supposed to be there. It's the responsibility is up to the owner. And in fact, they would have to deal with whatever happened that went wrong. As was mentioned, and we maybe, what do we do to make sure that things are safe? That's our job. Our job is to make sure that when you go into somebody's property or into a house or something, that's the safe thing to do. And
Thank you for that, Director. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? So those are both carried. Both of those will go to the board tomorrow for the board's vote for decision on it. And thank you again, Mrs. Cormack and Mr. Richards. So we will move on now. I'd like to do the next delegation, see if we can before we do any break this morning, because the next one's delegates been patiently waiting in the room. So 7.3 development variance permit, Forrest Denman. He is here as a delegation. If you want to join us, Forrest, at the table. Again, we'll ask for the sort of Coles notes, a quick recap from staff. Zach will give us the overview of what's being proposed, and we would open it to any additional comments you had, and we will have questions, and then close it back to our conversation. Zach, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Through the chair, the purpose of this variance application is to request variances to 3 specific zoning regulations related to the size of the farm residential footprint, the distance of the farm residential footprint from the property line, and the size of the dwelling. Earlier, or I guess it was last year, in March of 2024, the original dwelling on the property was destroyed by a fire. So that's kind of the whole rationale for this application. The proponent is looking to rebuild the dwelling units of a similar size to what previously existed. So the original size of the dwelling exceeded what is now permitted based on the regulations that were implemented as part of the Ag Policy Review. I guess like the main thing I just want to point out is that, generally if this was being requested on a greenfield site on a, undisturbed agricultural land, staff generally doesn't support these requests for the size of the dwelling or the size of the footprint. But given the circumstances that, they're looking to rebuild essentially what was there, and given that the legal non-conforming legislation in the Local Government Act doesn't allow them to rebuild without the benefit of a variance application, staff is recommending that the 3 variances be supported.
Okay, thank you, Zach. First, any comments, additional information you want to add? I think that the staff recommendations are in alignment with what you are seeking or what you need to reestablish your home. But any other information you wish to give the committee, or if not, if there's any questions for you, hopefully you'd be willing to answer. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you all taking time to consider this. The main thing that I would like to share is the Wendell community policy that created Ag 1 zoning that applies to my property and another. Limited the size of the home for the purpose of reducing the price of the property so that a young family could come and potentially use the property for agricultural purposes, which is exactly why we purchased the property, is that it was a good price and our family could come to that property and use it for agricultural purposes. The size of the house being what is required by the new zoning bylaw would, in essence, make us reconsider living on the property, and building a new home that was smaller, we feel would make us go somewhere else. And thus, the whole reasoning behind this, the idea of the size of the home goes away, because what seems to be historically accurate in the Creston Valley is that
these kind of properties that are small agricultural properties with newer homes get bought by retirees and not by young families. And so that would be just my one consideration to add to what Zachary's already said, is that we're intending to live on this property for a long time and use it for agricultural purposes. And a larger home to support my wife and my 3 children is a part of that. So that's the ask. Thank you for considering us.
Questions for the delegation, Director Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you through the chair. The recommendation put forward is for the approval of the variance. The 3 points that it raises with it, you're probably familiar with those 3 points.
Yes.
Is that sufficient for you in terms of that motion that's presented to us today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The questions? Will note your planned or projected use of this site is actually less impactful than the original house location, is it not?
It's, we're moving the house to a better location so that we can utilize more of the space for agricultural use than was currently available before, due to just the location of original driveways since the 50s.
Seeing no other questions for the second time, Director Vandenberg, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. And with your permission, I'd like to make to move.
Well, not while we have the delegation here at the table. Would just any further questions for the delegation? If not, thank you very much for coming in. And if you wouldn't mind returning to the gallery all the way back there.
Thank you.
Then we will deal with the business item. Any further questions for staff and/or this is an Area A recommendation, which actually I support. But first, any additional clarifications, questions for staff? And so hearing none, actually, I will move this recommendation to grant the variances.
I apologize, I didn't know if the chair was able to do so.
No, committee,
Only help.
I can. And seconded, Director Vandenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. What I do want to note is there was a very definite conversation years back that if we were to take 20-acre lots and cut them into 3, we'd like to see them remain 3 little micro farms or small niche market farming operations, and that wouldn't jive with a big house in the middle, because that's a whole different market than the small enterprise. So Area A's Ag 1 is different from Area B and C Ag 1, and literally pretty much across the street. You can see where the rules are different. I think we ended up with only 5 or 6, and this is a question of Zach. There's only 5 or 6 Area A Ag 1 properties in Wendell, and it doesn't extend anywhere else. It's highly unique. There's only a very small handful of existing properties that fall into Area A Ag 1, is there not?
Through the chair, I don't know the number of properties, but Area A is kind of, in terms of the Crested Valley, the agricultural capability is limited more to that Wendell area, just on the north end of the flats.
And my thoughts when we were joined together in areas A, B, and C and did joint planning, we're going to come up with uniform, standardized, whatever trigger word people want me to use or not use, comprehensive land use bylaws that would be sensible to everybody in the valley to say, okay, this makes sense. No, it's consistent. That was split apart, and we went this direction. And if you went back to conversations with then Agricultural Land Commission Chair Richard Bullock, we had a lot of conversation about what could we do to have the ALC support subdivision of unused fallow land into some smaller portions, which might become niche market farms. And this was exactly part of the conversation. Well, limit the size of the house so it doesn't become some monster house in the middle of a hobby farm. Failed exercise to date, I guess, is how I would have to assess it. But I thought it was a virtuous attempt to create a new vision for niche market, small family, affordable farms. So I'll quit pontificating. Any other comments or discussion on this recommendation? Director Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation, but I'd like to know that all the conversations that the young people to do this and being close to retirees, I think to find out a lot of retirees spend a lot of their time farming because it's the kind of thing they like to do. And so the age of the people is immaterial.
Yeah, it's a good point. We probably missed,
I think there's words in the Human Rights Act about that kind of thing.
and we missed the target. You're very right, Director, in our discussions a decade or more ago. Without further discussion, all in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? Being none, that is carried. We'll go to the board. Again, thank you for coming to the committee. We are on to the other page, unless I want to go backwards a page. So we're at 7.4, Development Variance Permit, Window Foods Limited. The Window Food store is being rebranded as a Canco. I believe we have the delegation online, just double checking again. Christine?
Yeah.
We have, Cy Atkinson, I see. And you may or may not be with David, or is it just yourself?
It's just me today.
Okay, very good. And so if we can, Sadie will give us a Cole's notes about what this variance permit application is all about. And then we'll go to you, Ms. Atkinson, as a delegation, same routine as the others. Sadie, please go ahead.
This is a development variance permit application in Windsor for the rebranding of three signs at their gas station and convenience store. This one's pretty straightforward. Staff recommend that the board approve this DEP, given that the established use on the property is consistent with what proposed. The proposal will align with the existing signage on the site and lack of any significant opposition from the public or other agencies.
Okay, thank you. Normally we would have the delegation come, but I see there's a question for staff. Vandenberg, did you want to go ahead or wait?
Yeah, no, I would, and thank you. Not that I have an issue with this at all. I'm just kind of wondering why staff just can't, if this meets all conditions, why is this coming fast?
Sangeet left. We have delegated authority for some permitting and not others, and this is a not. Sadie?
Yeah.
How does that break down?
Consistent with the zoning itself, there's general regulations regarding the signage, so there's slight inconsistencies. If you look on, I think the second page of the report shows exactly what it is. There's little issues with the setback, with the height, with the size of the signs. But they're not very out of step with what currently exists on the site and what is allowed by the bylaw, and that's why staff recommended support.
But being a development variance, thanks to us on the board, if we say did a rezoning and subsequently we had a development permit, not variance permit, development permit based on rezoning, we'd see the rezoning, we would not see the development permit. We've delegated that authority to go through those details to staff. So this, because it's a variance, is my understanding.
And also, the chair that there is like the authority under the Local Government Act for minor variances to be delegated in the same way development permits are. But currently the RDCP doesn't follow that process. The board retains that power to decision.
Yeah, future conversation potentially. So given that, Ms. Atkinson, do you want to add any information? You see what the staff recommendation is. If you want to add any information or elaborate on the recommendation, or is there anything that you might not agree with, the floor is yours, and then to answer questions, of course.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for allowing us to make this presentation. The only thing I want to add is that yesterday we got approval from the Ministry of Transportation. So that is very good news for us today.
And that's on the zero setback of the existing signpost, which is right on the edge of the road. Thank you. Any questions for the delegation from the committee? Seeing none, that's fairly straightforward. I guess if you wanted to mute again, Ms. Atkinson, we will go into discussing the staff recommendation. Thanks. So on the recommendation, I will move this recommendation for discussion. Scenario 8. I see a second. Discussion. Go ahead, Director Weatherhill.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a general question about signage. So that exists within the OCP. Is that where it exists? And does every area have a signage?
Sadie?
Through the chair, this one lists the zoning bylaws, so the second section of it is general regulations that apply generally to all zones, and it's in the comprehensive land use bylaw, but within the zoning bylaw portion of the comprehensive land use bylaw. Not confusing at all.
Further questions for staff? Watson, please go ahead.
Just to add to that, to ensure we're clear, then that means it would not apply across the regional district everywhere. It would apply within a zoning bylaw specific to that area. I think we tend to get OCPs and zoning a little confused, so it just helps to clarify things.
Yeah, and I'd hate to ask, but I will. Is it similar to what B and C have for signage?
I'm gonna have to check my notes.
No, that's fine. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation. Anyone opposed? So thank you. That goes to the board tomorrow as well. So maybe if we could do two more items before we take a break. Actually three. We could go, if you're willing. Let's see how these go. We have what time is it? 10:50. Let's take a break now. Because this next item might take a little while. So let's take 10 minutes to 10:25 Pacific time. And then we'll come back. Thanks.
Item for next item.
Okay, we are at 25 minutes past the hour. We will call the meeting back to order. I'm just double checking. Do we have a quorum? We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us in the room plus online. So if everybody could take their seat and end the side conversations. We were on item 7.5. This is for information, not that it may not lead to a bit of a discussion. We have a 2024 Planning Services Year-End Report. I don't know if this was prepared by Sangeeta or Nelson, or whose staff lead would be to answer questions on it, or is that, are you here, Sadie, to answer questions of him? Is Nelson online? I see Sangeeta online, leave it to whoever. So it's fairly lengthy. I guess that indicates there's a lot going on. Do any directors have any questions, observations, or any discussion around this report, or do we move on to the next item? Director Cunningham.
Yes, certainly. This one has to do with regards to one property that was, let me see, where did I see it? Area C, the Nelson Land Corporation. Now, the Nelson Land Corporation, as you're well aware, the people that bought all the land around the lake out there and within here. And what one property were they talking about, or how many? In staff, give me a little bit of word. I know it says it's on hold. I'm like, yeah, it's on hold. But a little bit of outline, this is, I seem to recall something, but my memory's not good enough.
There are, I don't know if there's 100 or more items here. It may be difficult to start asking questions about all of them. I mean, go ahead if somebody knows right offhand. This is on the first page, I think, the one you're referring to. Z2403G file number. I don't know if there's a quick and easy answer, or maybe other than specific questions, we can just sort of maybe look for more general questions about the format of the report, the frequency, that sort of thing. But does anyone on staff know about that one, Sadie?
Through the chair, that's one of my applications. I can't remember the exact details at this moment, but I know that the applicant initiated putting it on hold prior to going first or second reading because they're reconsidering whether they want to go forward or not.
That's probably why I didn't hear.
Okay, Director Weatherhead and Watson, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair to Cindy. There is one here for Edward Community Internet Society for an internet tower. That society is full. And so I'm just interested in, is that it's not saying whether it's in process or it was just that it actually was referred by the province. So I just don't have any information on application.
Through the chair, I don't know if I ever, I don't have information.
Is it something I should follow up with, or is it something that I'll just be related?
Through the chair, we have a regular referral process, so if there's something that's coming to you, it'll come to you, but I can follow up.
Because it has been extended retention.
So the good point to be noted here is that if this was, and I think we used to have a quarterly issue of this, that would permit directors to scan through it and maybe help staff, pinpoint ones that perhaps the organization's defunct, or they can circle back and remove it from the work plan instead of having sort of dormant or whatever work items that will never be resurrected sit stagnant on the list. So, I mean, it's a good point. And so that was one of my questions. Might as well ask, can we receive this report quarterly now? It's probably looked at, I would hope, monthly internally, because you all need to do your work planning. Sangeeta? And then I do have a speaker's list. Perhaps she's not there. We'll look back to that. So I had Cunningham, Weatherhead, Watson, and Tierney. Please go ahead, Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the, I'm not going to ask all the specifics on the one I see. I just wanted to, because we don't know who the file planner might be, can we just send it to plan department at whatnot to determine our questions and who they go to?
With the file number.
With the file number, yes, that's very helpful. So
through the chair, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And Sangeeta's on there now, she's popped on.
Well, let's go to Director Kearney and then we'll loop back on sort of how we can interact with this report a little better maybe. Director Kearney.
Thank you, Chair. My questions for Sadie or staff, in regards to the, Blackmore application, for temporary use permit. See, it's on hold. And just wanting an understanding of, is it on hold, waiting for the applicant to, comment or to, push the application forward, or? Just an understanding in general.
I just wonder, could we just direct all these questions outside of the meeting and we can answer them directly?
And that is a good point. I think the purpose here is to highlight how many applications there are, to gain insight, as Director Weatherhead just provided, that maybe somebody they're waiting on will never answer because they no longer exist, and that we give staff the appropriate path to either removing it from the list or confirming. The details, if we were to go through 100 items, we would need a separate meeting. But absolutely, I think that would be, and as Chair Watson also said, pick your file number and just say, could I please have an update? I like to try and be as patient as possible with a lot of these. My philosophy is a landowner can start down a path, and if they're indecisive about what they want to do, it is none of my personal business because it's their land. When it comes to here's an application and staff has a report, now it's my responsibility, not just my business, my responsibility to formulate an opinion and make a recommendation. But I can't try and second guess what my residents are struggling with. And I don't personally want staff to try and second guess what they're struggling with either. I want to clear their workload if we know something, definitely. But I don't want to otherwise be hovering. And I think if you go back a long time, you will find some directors love to come into this office and wander around and say, oh, what's happening with the Smiths? What's happening with the Joneses? What's happening with the, and we cannot do that because they won't get anything done. So I do appreciate the genuine interest, and especially if there's issues with our constituents where they want to know. I think Director Cunningham had a great example. When there's a neighborhood concern, maybe it's time for the director to be a little more up to date. So I don't want to sound too heavy-handed, but I think, is that a reasonable approach now?
Yeah, Chair, you can direct all those to me unless you happen to know who the file manager is. And in that case, Director Tierney was asked about what SAE is the file manager on, so you can just go over directly for that update. And yet, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions on those files.
Yes, I realize it's inappropriate to go through each one, and Nelson's made it very clear that I'm welcome to call him anytime and discuss these things, so I appreciate that. And
okay. And then I saw Director Vandenberg, your hand, and then I do want to loop back to, maybe we can see this on a quarterly basis to keep it fresh in our minds, but Director Vandenberg,
Great, thank you to the Chair. And quarterly would be beneficial. So my question would be, some of these are unfamiliar to me as we're reviewing them. Is it fair for me to ask you, is there a reason, am I missing the emails on some of this stuff, or some of this stuff just doesn't come to me? Should it, is my question. If it was quarterly, then I could reach out if I do have any questions, just to become more familiar with, probably more familiar with than anything else, what's going on in my backyard. So that's my first question, and I have another.
Yep, go ahead.
Now, Chair, the answer is absolutely. Reach out anytime if you have any questions. And yes, you get referred on those applications. So it's possible you missed an email. It's possible we aired as well. But yeah, usually that's part of the process, is to update the director when you have these files, part of the referral process. And if you feel like you missed something, follow up with me directly, and I can connect you with the file manager.
And further,
and the further is that, and I think maybe I need to follow up with you, but I've already taken the time. I'm going to finish it. We have a logging activity occurring right next to Highway 3A. Just clear cut the whole thing. People are asking me what's going on. I have no idea. I'm thinking it's a private deal. And when it comes to private situations in logging, you don't necessarily know about it either then, I would think. Is that correct?
That's true, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I have flagged some of those. This just south of Wendell, just north of Wendell, where they're actually logging the right of way and using access illegally. This is years back. And I've gone to NRO, highways, and our planning staff jointly. So you may find yourself in that situation because it may be beyond what planning staff can manage, but it certainly may be of interest to others. Director Watson, I think you wanted to follow up on my earlier question. Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll take the opportunity. So the one question we're wanting to clarify is, can we now get these quarterly, and then we can do that check-in a little more efficiently?
Chair Jack, that was the intention to, and in the past we had done them quarterly. It may have just got missed in the past year with workload and whatnot, but that was our intention previously them quarterly. We actually did have one in December, but we were a bit late on getting it on the agenda, so I told our staff to just give them the annual one, and we'll endeavor to do that on a quarterly basis going forward.
Thank you. Some quick
Further?
supplemental.
Yes.
Just a plug that I've sent a few emails on woodlot referrals. If I can just give another plug to, because I've got two now that I'm just wanting to verify our process. Don't give it to me now, but just if we can circle back on.
All that down, and I think there's some information we can share back to you.
Great, thank you.
And I'm going to add, I like the level of detail. It's enough for me to say, oh yeah, I know where that is, or for me to recognize that I don't know where it is, maybe I'll follow up. So thanks very much. We will then see no other questions. Director Davidoff, sorry, and I haven't flipped back to chat for a while. Director Davidoff, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at the last page of the report and the number of applications. And I see from 2021 to 2024, there's been a 60% reduction in the number of applications. And I know we've been talking about staffing and things like that. So I'm just wondering if staff could explain the trend. You know, we had 227 applications in 2021. We had 174 in 2022, 2023, 161, 2024, 140. And like, I mean, I did the math and it actually shocked me because a 60% reduction from 2021 to 2024. Is this a trend or where are we at with this?
Nelson, part of that post-COVID? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can't explain what, why that would be, why we're seeing a drop off at all in terms of applications. From a staffing perspective, certainly we have more than enough work, and our finding with the current planners obviously have their workload to deal with these development applications. And moving on to assisting some of the project work is also where we direct their capacity if they have any. We haven't really found an excess of capacity with our current planners dealing with that current file load.
I appreciate your question, Director Davidoff, because there are the two factors that maybe the public's not aware of, and I do think we have public still online here. We see provincial legislative changes which are highly impactful to planning staff that don't show up here as, you know, representing hundreds of hours. We also continually have compliance and enforcement issues. And the amount of time, more time on fewer cases may add up to a substantial percentage over and above these person hours that we see here. And that is a drain or a burden on our resources, which is not easy to demonstrate to the public, but it's real. And from time to time, we see snapshots of that. So that's a whole separate conversation, but I appreciate your mentioning, Director Davidoff, that we can see trends, but we have to realize those are in parallel to other trends which impact the exact same staff, and they're not on this chart.
So supplemental, Chair, if I may.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, and I actually just did an analysis of that last sheet, and basically I saw like from 2020 to 2024. In 2020 we had 27 ALR applications. In 2024 we had 4. Another big one was Crown referrals. In 2020 we had 24. In 2024 we had 10. So those were some kind of really big swings, and and I fully appreciate what the chair has stated, that there's other offloading and downloading that's going on that is concerning. Like I said, I'm a stats guy. I looked at the data and I'm seeing a 60% reduction in applications. So then we did talk about utilizing the Aggresso module to track staff times, and we never did go there to actually see exactly what each staff person was working on and the time being spent. And I know we never followed up on that conversation. We talked about it for a few years, and then we said, okay, we're not going to track staff time to see exactly what staff is doing. It's a bigger conversation, but a 60% reduction is a 60% reduction. So I think that's maybe staff could come back and just explain this a little better at a future meeting.
So our CEO has stepped out of the room, and I will leave it to him. He's left his computer, so I don't know what's called him away. You know, there's always issues emerging day by day. Of course, I'd leave it to him and senior managers as to how staff are tracking. Good point to revisit that, Director, at a future date. We do know why the push on the Agricultural Land Commission referrals was created. ALC telegraphed that they were going to change the rules and cut off or disallow certain types of applications as of a certain date. And we saw a flurry of applications, many of them in electoral area E as an example, trying to get in under the wire. So we can't go into diagnosing those ebbs and flows. We are subject to pressures from outside entities which impact decisions of our landowners, and really we need to deal with it. But your overall comments are appreciated, and yes, at some point we could revisit how staff tracks workload. I would like to move on. I don't see any other speakers to this item. If we can go to item 7.6, this is the one, Christine, you put on by addendum because we needed to check in or check up on it. This was a development variance permit from Pritchard, electoral area B. It was referred from December 11th to 15th. There has been, staff has tried to follow up. And at this point in time, they're recommending referral of this item onto the February 19th RAC meeting. So could we have a motion for referral of this item? Director Tierney, or second? Propriety of referral, I think staff's already stated that they are working on this, need more time. All in favor of referral? Any opposed? So that is going to Rural Affairs in February. Item 8, we do not have any environmental services items. Again, another housekeeping item almost, item 9. 9.1 was referred from December 11th to this meeting. Between the morning rural meeting and the next morning's board meeting, the director worked with staff and we came to a solution. So we actually passed an amended recommendation on this item at the board meeting. So it will not come back to rural. So this is helping Christine and admin staff properly track this stuff. We will not see this again as dealt with. So I will look now at, I was going to say 11:44, 10:44 Pacific time, public time, and I should open my screen again. We had media online for a while. I don't know if we still have. Are there any members of the public wishing to ask a question of this committee at this time? There's nobody in the room, so I'll ask again, just if somebody's online and might need a moment to unmute themselves. Is there any member of the public that wishes to ask a question of this committee? So I don't see anybody unmuted. Nobody is in chat. So we have no questions from the public. So I'd entertain a motion to close the meeting to the public. So, Vandenberg, Watson, all in favor? And the motion to recess and reconvene in camera, Hanegraaff, move, and Mule, second, all in favor. So we will wait a minute to make sure that we